Bill Liebler, welcome to this fireside chat. How are you?
I'm very good, Martin. How are you doing today?
Excellent, despite the not very sunny weather in London today, but all good.
Same thing in North Carolina, but we need the rain, so we'll take it.
Excellent. We could use a few sunny days, but doesn't matter. I'm not going to complain. Well, look, really delighted that you could make this call in this session. Before we start, for the benefit of the audience, would love to just, if you could give a little bit of an introduction on yourself, your background, and how you come into this universe of value practice.
Sure. So, as you said, Bill Liebler, I've been in and around technology sales, consulting, ran IT for a couple organizations, then I hopped over into the software business many years ago. And it really, the introduction to value was, I think, probably the way a lot of us were, which is by accident.
I've heard that, yes.
I was at IBM acquired a company I was with. We had done some TCO work, but I really wasn't part of that, and I didn't like where we landed. And what me personally at IBM, so I talked to my old boss, and he said, we're starting this new thing. Come to a meeting," and flew out to Colorado Springs. We talked about what the organization was trying to do, and a few of us started, what really became kind of the value assessment team. And it certainly morphed over time. I was fortunate enough to do that globally with IBM and then moved a team to North America. It's just the way IBM works. You start something globally, you move it to North America. And I actually got to spend 2 years in Singapore during the growth markets phase of big corporate America, leading a team across Eastern Europe, Latin America, Asia, Australia. And, that was quite eye opening, very different than, Western Europe and North America. And what does value mean? How do you express it? And then 7 years ish ago, I decided it was time to exit IBM. I had a value colleague from Australia who had landed at NetSuite, saw it on LinkedIn, pinged him, and he's like, "Hey, I think they're growing the team." Came in, decided, okay, great. I'll just come in as an IC, do the value. We call it value management here. Loved it. And then the director of the team moved on, and I applied for the role. So for the last 4 years, I've been leading
Amazing.
NetSuite's global value management team.
Amazing. Thanks, Bill. And just out of curiosity, when you go from from the very similar practice of value practice, value engineering or value management, from one large organization that has their way proven process of doing something within the value, and you to another, equally very large, very successful business, have you found differences culturally in how the organization perceives value, applies the value practice? Or do you find that the nuts and bolts are very, very similar?
I think a little bit of both. Ultimately, the nuts and bolts, as I see it, are the foundational levels, right? You need people that can engage with customers. You need folks with high business acumen. You need folks with consultative selling skills. You need the ability to, as I used to tell folks, what we do for a living is we create a PhD thesis for a business, and we're presenting it to folks that know more than we will ever know about their business. And our job is to get them that business case to be theirs.
Yes.
Um,
Couldn't
you
have
know,
said it
the,
better.
those are kind of the nuts and bolts. I think the big difference that I've seen between an IBM and a NetSuite is what you're selling. Heavy technology based sales are very different than ERP business based sales, whether it's ERP or planning and budgeting or, supply chain planning. It's You're talking to different people, you have different value propositions, you have very different impact areas. Those are different. And then the scale. If you're doing business cases for Fortune 100 companies, these are long, drawn out, 3, 4, 6, 8 week engagements with solution architects, and you're building very large. Our typical deliverable at NetSuite is 5 to 7 charts, done in several hours. So it's much, the volume, the velocity, the ability to very quickly
Agree.
engage, package, and deliver and the amount of time you get to spend in front of the customer is the big differences I've seen between those two types of kind of sales or the customer you're selling to within the prospect or the ultimate customer in an account management post sale environment.
Do you see the simplicity or the complexity of the business case being associated or yeah, linked to the complexity of the product or the size of the deal?
That's an interesting question. Certainly, the size of the deal and the size of who you're selling to, so kind of their
Sure. Number of
sophistication, if
stakeholders.
you will, yeah, their business complexity,
Mm,
their experience in buying technology. When you're engaging with the JP Morgans of the world or the General Motor, I mean, or the HSBCs, if you're in London, they're sophisticated buyers. They have huge IT staffs. They have huge procurement staffs. They have a lot of process. It makes it very different and certainly drives, I think, the scale and the scope of what you need to package for them. Whereas, if you're selling to 5 to $250 million businesses, certainly as you get up into that upper realm, things change. But that kind of the under $100 million company, you're typically going to have way less overhead, if you will, to deal with within their buying process and their buying cycle.
And when you're selling to that segment, which I guess you could call mid-market to a degree, how do you decide between, your resource and your team's resource is a very dear resource, right? It's
Yes,
probably,
sir.
I don't know what the ratio between value manager and value engineer per rep is, but it must be like 1 to 20, 1 to 50, 1 to 100, or some.
Bingo. Bingo. You're in the last two ranges
I
there.
knew I'd get somewhere by time growing. So that means that it's a constant trade-off between the ability to support and enable value-based selling and the rest of the pipeline. And so how do you balance the higher velocity deals, the mid-market, which tends to be maybe, well, it tends to be the meat of the pipeline, possibly the less lumpy and more predictable type of forecasting? How do you balance that? Do you use tooling? Do you do training? Do you provide some self-service to the reps?
Yes. So when I first took over this role, we had a tool that was very static and it was built for a specific purpose. And we morphed that into something more dynamic, editable in many ways. And we did focus very heavily on its rollout with the idea that we could get some population of the sales team using it. And we've had good success with that. I mean, well over the last 2 or 3 years, we've averaged between 3 and 4 thousand of those created by sellers. How many of those get presented to customers? I can't tell you, but if nothing else, the rep is thinking about what's the impact to the business and we're changing their mindset. One of my favorite stories is I worked with a very new rep. He was an English major and couldn't do math, according to him. He is now using that tool selling to the larger end of our customer base, building out his own business cases, presenting them, winning for us six-figure deals, which are pretty large on a consistent basis. So that was a big part of it. I mean, the other part of it is for our team is also using some tools, but then I also believe in this is a creative thing that we do. So we don't put people in a box and say you have to do it this way because the scenarios that we deal with require, oh, they don't need a typical ROI, net present value, 5-year cash flow model. They need something else because they know their executive team, they know their board, they know what the PE firm is looking for, whatever the case may be. So we try to balance that. And then the reality is we do have to put guardrails up
Sure.
around size of deals. They're not rigid and will support virtually anything, but our focus is, if it's going to be a very small opportunity, let's use the automated tool. Let's put something together, do it as quickly as possible. If we've got a very, very large opportunity by our standards, and you've got to go build something, call it from scratch. I hate to use that term. It's not
Sure.
really. I mean, we have base things, but those are much, much more time and effort to really put together that compelling case. So I hope that makes sense from your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because we work with a lot of companies of very different levels of, let's just say, value selling sophistication. Quite a few that have a whole value practice and have the need to scale it, and so they apply our solution, our business case platform. But there's a lot of companies out there that where we come in, where our company platform comes in and gets deployed, where they've always sold on features and demos, right? And they've this concept of value selling can be quite intimidating. There's, of course, MedPIC, but it's not really a value selling methodology, more of a qualification methodology. What is right for us? And then there's a lot of hesitation on the part of many of the reps because they've got to do pipeline. They've got so many things already on their plate. For them to have to
Absolutely.
decide between, all right, I need to change the way that I sell, readapt it, risking the fear of their performance dipping because of the time they need. I'm sure you've seen this before, but we see that a lot, right? Because there's maybe a few hundred companies that do it really well, maybe less, probably 100 companies do it really, really well, have a value practice. And then there's the entire rest of the B2B software, B2B universe that kind of are making it up as they go along. And to credit to them, a lot of companies do very well, but it's almost like there is this concern that either that medic, the whole Mr. Miyagi trust the process model, people are concerned, right? And
Right.
how do you I guess address that concern? And do you think, yeah, how do you address that concern?
I think it's probably the biggest challenge we face in something that's really landed with me over the last couple of years is how do you move from value being an event or an engagement to it being, as you're saying, the Mr. Miyagi process? How do you really embed something like Medic? And for me, we focus on, as we talk about it, we focus on the I. So you got to identify the pain and the M. And by the way, the M equals a number. It doesn't equal, oh, they need better visibility or they need better reporting. What does that mean? What's the impact? So getting that embedded, and we have a very large sales force here. I think the single biggest challenge that we all face in trying to get sellers to recognize that this is something that needs to start from the initial conversation. The more you can get your prospect, or in the case of post sales, your customer, talking about their business, opening up on what their challenges are, that's where you can begin to form and create what value means to them.
Love it.
I'm a big believer that value is in the eye of the beholder. The beholder is our customer. There might be five, there might be two, there might be 20 beholders that we're selling to. And we need to be able to, throughout the sales cycle, address each one of them. You really don't know. I just read a piece yesterday from Forrester. 86% of deals stalled last year. 86%.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
you have 100 prospects, 14 of them are going to go to closure, and you're going to win whatever your win rate is.
I've got a very strong
That's
opinion about the reasons why, but it's a
Oh, I do
subjective
too.
opinion.
I do, Mark. I absolutely every time I mean, this has been going on for forever. It's just that as the buyers get more sophisticated, as they use the internet, as they do their homework before they ever talk to a vendor, and you're well aware, I'm sure, of what's been published out there by Forrester and Gartner and everybody else. The idea that you wait till halfway through or three quarters or 90% through of a sales cycle to begin to identify and quantify what the value means to them
Or you wait,
is why.
or you wait until the customer asks you to help them with a business case, right?
Yes. Or worse, you present the price and they're like,
Before,
"What
yes,
are you, crazy?" No, you're right. And at least if they're asking you to help with a business case,
you're in
you
good shape.
you know you know you're either in the lead or they know, oh, you mentioned this team that exists.
Yeah.
And to me, that becomes, the real event based, value. And we do it all the time, unfortunately. And how you move that to the front end of the sales cycle
Yeah.
and make it not the business case, but make it a cumulative so that when you do present something sometime, hopefully before pricing, final pricing and your SOW, that customer's like, oh yeah, yeah, all through this sales process, you've identified I need to improve my cost of goods sold. I need to reduce inventory. I need to close the books faster. I need to do better field service management. Whatever your solution is, it becomes, I hate to say a fait accompli, but it's just more logical and more comfortable as opposed to, well, this sounds good, but I can't justify price X. Oh, we have a team that can help you with that. Okay, great. And we jump on a call, and like I said, we do it all the time. And our win rate's 86% higher when we do those things. But you'd much rather do it
Yeah.
over the course of an opportunity life cycle than at a point.
Imagine companies that don't have the benefit of your team, of the value consultants and the value practice. How do
Yeah,
they do it, right? There's a whole, and that's why before we even began recording, I talked a little about one of the reasons why we're doing these fireside chats is outside of the community of probably a few hundred of your colleagues, of your peers, the rest of the world doesn't really know the depth of an impact of value selling and value consulting. It's a wonderful
right.
community because there's so much just collective knowledge that our goal with these fireside chats is to try to share that knowledge to so many of the other companies that are unable to have the kind of team that you have at NetSuite. And going back to the whole premise of why deals get stalled, what we see is a lot of the time, in John McMahon's book, The Qualified Sales Leader, which is a bible in the whole value selling space, he talks about that stage at the very end of the sales cycle that he calls buyer risk, where the greatest level of risk is heightened because the buyer needs to sign. They need to move forward on, right, everything's ready. We've done the full assessment. Now we actually need to take the step of committing to that purchase. And if you don't have a compelling enough business case that is believable and a convincing implementation plan, that's going to fall through the cracks. And we believe, and I say it subjectively because we're a business case platform, but a lot of the reason why deals die due to indecision is because the champion just hasn't been able to deliver a sufficiently compelling business case to their economic buyer. That economic buyer,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And obviously, the scale of the company, like we talked a little bit about, determines. I mean, it's one thing if you're selling to the signer
yes,
and they're sold, and you did it through. They saw enough in a demo that they could picture, oh, my day in the life is going to be a lot better with your solution. Great, I'll sign. It's a whole lot different. To your point, you got to go to an economic buyer, or you've got to go to a private equity firm
mm,
whose their whole thing is, wait a minute, we want increase in EBITDA, and you tell me how swapping out your X dollar solution for your X plus dollar solutions going to help on EBITDA. If they can't explain it, they're like, then go do some more work and come back to us.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely.
And that more work could get shoved aside for a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's interesting.
And switching tact a little bit or switching direction a little bit, what would you say are the key critical success factors for deploying a successful value practice in an organization from cultural, methodological, any of those pillars?
As a guy who raced sailboats for years, I like your use of the word tack, by the way. But um, I think, what's the goal? Let's start with that, because if the goal is to build a value practice, which I'm a firm believer of, I've made very nice living for the last almost 20 years, thanks to it, or 22 years. To me, that becomes, who are the right people? What can you identify what you need? And one of my big lessons over the last few years is you need a slightly different person if you're building a new business model or you're building a post-sale support of account management. Those are, and value realization is a very hot topic. And
Absolutely.
I've talked to some folks who started there, and that's a very different model than we're here to help drive new business to then feed that. And then is that group focused more on driving, net recurring revenue and growing the base, or are they more focused on customer success? So I think that, the first step is what is your model? Where are you starting? If you're starting from scratch, you probably don't want to try to tackle both at the same time. My predecessor, we started as new business. We kind of got the account management group going when I've grown that over the last few years, and just it's really been eye-opening because I've always been focused on the new business side. So it's a lot of learning, which was
I can
great.
imagine. Yeah.
I think you do have to look seriously at what tools are you going to use and who are those tools for. As we discussed a little bit earlier, we built a tool. All of ours are built internally. We can debate that all day long, but we've tried to get some scale by automating some of that for the reps that are inclined to use it. But then also, what's going to be your platform, and then I think the toughest part is then how do you get folks to recognize we need to leverage these resources? They're going to have some ratios that aren't like SCs. There's a lot of SCs and not many of us. So what are the right deals? But then how do you connect with those teams? How do you get the leadership to support you on this team will make an impact on our business? So you got to create the internal value case before we
Yeah.
can go create the external value case.
The value case
Which,
for value case.
yes, which is often as hard or harder sale. I'm sure you've seen that plenty of times. You guys sell platforms to help with that, so
Yes.
that's you're doing that. Um,
We use our platform to sell our platform, basically.
yeah, well, that's good. That's good. But then you have to. The part that I think is the hardest is how do you switch from, oh, we have a value engineering or consulting or and I'm not sure like any of value management consulting. I'm not sure what the right frame should be, but whatever. How do you switch from, oh, we have this team that does this to how do you inculcate
Mm.
value selling across the organization?
It's
That,
tough.
yeah, to use the old crossing the chasm concept. I haven't seen many large organizations that have crossed that chasm.
Yeah.
We're you stand on two sides of the bridge and one yells across, "Hey, I need a business case," and you're like, "What do you know? Not much. Come help us." You know,
But I
that
think
chasm is
I,
is big.
I think it was Genius Drive who published some stat that only 19% of sales of GTM teams actually deploy some method of value selling or medic.
Yes. Yeah, that I haven't read that one, but yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
surprised at all. And at least, whether our team that focuses on very small customers uses BANT. We use Medic for the rest of the organization. There's been talk of others. There's certain, at least those at least get you to think
Yep.
about, in the case of BANT, what's the need? In the case of Medic, what's the pain? And what are the metrics? But how do you get it from, if you look at sales teams, and you may use slightly different percentages, but I use a 20-60-20. 20% are your superstar sellers.
Yep.
They make their number every year. They leverage what resources they need. Typically, if you sit down and walk through a successful cycle with them, they are value sellers.
Yep.
You got the 60% in the middle. Some percentage of those, 70, 80, 90% of quota, you're certainly not going to get rid of them. They're striving for how do I make club? How do I hit accelerators? And then you got the 20% that, quite frankly, probably should be doing something else for a living, or
Mhm.
at least a different product. It's how do you get 50% of the 60%? How do you get
Level them
that
up.
group
Yeah.
and level them up? I think the biggest challenge we face in
Mm.
larger organizations. Had a couple of folks leave my team to go start value, and they're on their own in a small group, but even there in conversations with them, it's still a struggle. You've got 15 sellers and you're like, hey folks, if you could go learn this, this, and this about the customer, it could really accelerate this. That's the toughest part I think about what we do, Martin,
Cultural
is
change.
how do you do change management's hard.
Absolutely. And there, I think you said a really interesting point, which is that you may not need to practice value selling religiously, but to understand the fundamentals, that what you're trying to do in a sales process is really just to understand what are the pain points that this organization has, and how do you try to figure out a value that can be ascribed to that pain point, so that then your solution can demonstrate a degree of value. Now, you may not have to go through the rigorous methodology of MEDDIC or BAND, but at least getting an organization oriented around value, so it's not always a focus on features and the demo, that at least can get you, maybe that 80%, right? And maybe that's enough for some organizations, or at least maybe
Yeah,
that's enough for some segments.
yeah. There's a lot of 3D sales motions out there.
Yeah.
Demo, discount, DocuSign, right?
I've never heard that. I love it. That's going to be a
One
LinkedIn
of my
post
team
right there.
members coined that, so I got to give
I
Tim
love it.
Banks credit. But yeah, it's you
Yeah.
know,
Every one of
and I'm
these,
like, can we put a fourth? At least put discovery in the front of it.
power of three, the power of three.
There
Only.
you go.
What's interesting is every one of these fireside chats, one of those nuggets really comes out. I love that concept. But also, I had a call with a gentleman called David Copy last week. He runs value at a company called Sysdig. And he said something that it was just a very different perspective. He said, look, in every sale, there is a business case. The business case exists.
Yes.
You just have to find
Yeah.
it. You have to help
Yeah.
your champion discover. I love that concept that you know you will never sell anything. Nothing will ever get purchased without a business case. So
That's right.
if you're the rep, if you're the seller, wouldn't it be in your best interest to formulate that business case on behalf or in partnership or collaboration with your champion, so together you align on those, the pain points and the value, so that it's you have some degree of control over how the value is understood, so when it comes time to selling, then you probably have the deal that you would want and not some fraction of the value of that deal.
And it's a massive differentiator.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I don't know. I've done can't even begin to count. 1,000, 2,000, whatever it is, business cases. The number of times the prospect said, "Thank you so much.
100%.
We were struggling with how to put this together. We were thinking this. You brought these other things to the plate that, boy, and then we really see how your solution's going to help us with." At that point, it's no longer, it's a joint business case, but they own it.
Yes.
I mean,
That's
as I said earlier, that's the goal, is to create that case that they can own. The only way to do that is gradual buy. It's really hard to come in at the end
yeah.
blind and present a business case and have somebody go, "Wow, Martin, you're genius." It's more like, "Yeah, thanks." But if they ask for the help, if you kind of just naturally fall into it, say, we can help with this." It's amazing how many people, you know, will say thank you, and I didn't have the time, and I think it's Gartner or Forrester, and I know Genius Drive talks about this, that the percentage of customers who are truly either uncomfortable or they just haven't done these kinds of cases for whatever your solution is. I mean, this is not what they
Yeah.
do day in and day out.
Bill,
You'll hit the big companies that have their
yeah.
templates and have, here's how you do a business case. It's got to, forget those, but I mean the vast majority who most of us are selling to don't have that rigor, and bringing something to them that makes their life easier.
Bill,
Turn around and package it in your template, package it in your company's PowerPoint format, whatever, but we got you 90% of the way there.
you've
We
just
just saved you hours.
you just expressed our reason for being, Bill. That is
Yeah,
exactly.
there you go.
No,
Okay,
because
good.
that's the pain. That's the pain. I can't believe how quickly this has gone. Look, I do have two more questions for you, because it's
Okay.
it's part of our entire series. First question is: we talked a lot about value selling. Who is the best value selling professional you've ever worked with?
It's there's been a lot in my career, folks who are really really good. There's two that popped in my mind. Both they were both colleagues at IBM. there's a ton on my current team at NetSuite I could throw in this, but one Adam Lawrence, who is now a very senior executive at IBM, and he worked large account value cases as well as anyone I've ever seen. And partly it was his consultative skills. He came out of PwC, just as a lot of us have a
Sure.
management consulting background, but his ability to orchestrate a group of folks, which we had to have, at IBM, it really took a village, and to package the story, present the story, and build a relationship with the key people in the customer. And then the other is a gentleman named Greg Price. He and I are very good friends, but Greg really started the first. He did total cost of ownership models back at the integration company that IBM bought that we were with. And again, it's I've watched him morph from IBM to other places, but he was a management consultant. So maybe there's a recurring theme here, but just
No, it's common.
um,
You see that. You see it a lot.
yeah, yeah. But just that both of them had the ability to, I think, cut through the complexity, build a relationship with the client, build very compelling stories, and orchestrate that process. And as I said, there's so many folks on my current team that I could, run through. Rob Eldridge in Australia way back when, Simon Esom, another Aussie. There were just so many that have been, and let's face it, Martin, as somebody leading the team,
Yeah.
my goal is to always have people who were better than me as the ones out doing it. And I think I was okay at it, but
Amazing. Thank
So
you.
one other question you had, sir.
So we talked about value selling professionals. How about within your peer group? Who are the best engineers or value management professionals that you've worked with, or value
That's who I
consultants?
was just talking about.
Ah,
Sorry, that's who I was just talking about.
understood.
So maybe I got the question wrong.
No,
Those guys were value professionals.
got it.
So
And on
so
the
is your other one about reps?
yes, on the rep side.
Oh, okay. All right. My bad. There's a gentleman here at NetSuite named Kyle Milligan who he was top rep for several years. And every time we worked together, he was funny because he would say, I should use you more. And I would always say, hey, Kyle, appreciate that, but you're breaking records here for a reason. And watching him engage, he's one of the few reps who did his own discovery, no sales consultant on with him, no sales engineer, whatever term you want
Amazing.
to use for him. He listened intently to the customer. And if he had a customer that was kind of on the fence about moving forward, he would open up his laptop and do a 90-second, 2-minute, high level executive demo. I never saw it fail in getting a prospect. Okay, I want to learn more. So he was masterful at the tease, but then asking the questions
It's an art.
around their why.
Yeah,
And that's when people ask me kind of what's the art and or trick, if you will. I hate to use that term. It's that ability to ask a prospect, hey Martin, you don't wake up every day and say it's a great day for a new system, whatever you're selling. So tell me what's your why,
that's great.
and then just
I
be
love it.
quiet. And Kyle was very, he didn't do it quite. That's exactly how I did it. But Kyle did that in a manner that extracted and then again, that ability to orchestrate, to go to the sales consultant to say, this is exactly what you need to demo. And then he would augment that demonstration with pause right there for a second. Remember, Martin, when you talked about
Yeah,
how
that's
you
cool.
didn't have visibility to cost of goods sold?
Those dot
Yeah.
connections are
Okay,
so
great.
powerful.
Yeah, he didn't necessarily turn that into, well, do you think you could improve margins 1%? No, you're a $50 million company. That's $500,000. I mean, but just so that's who comes to my mind. There were, again, over all the years I've been doing this, there's a laundry list of
I can
amazing
imagine.
sellers I can think of, but in the last 5 or 6 years here, he clearly stands out to me as the person that embodies that, and he's now managing a team, and I think he's infusing a lot of that into his sellers. So
What a wonderful
you know,
compliment. I'm sure he'll love to hear that.
yes, Yeah, absolutely. So,
Bill, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation.
well, thank you, Martin. I hope you get a couple of things. One, a couple of days of sunshine over there in London. Have a wonderful holiday season, and
Likewise.
wish you and your team much success going forward.